Ago this month marks, well, a big celebration because it would be the first time I would go out of state for an experience I would never forget. 20 years ago, I went with fellow church members, which, yes, I've said this numerous times, I am in fact a Christian, but I'm not one of those die-hard Christians. But you might notice a dash hound bus in all its glistening glory of, big, uh, unusually aerodynamic glory. You might notice a few windows busted. I kind of had a little wreck getting here, but yeah. So, you're probably wondering, so what exactly did happen 20 years ago? Well, I think it's about time I did something special to tell you. It all started in 2004, and a little guy named me. I Okay, screw the song. Yeah, I was thinking about doing a song. Wait, you know what? Yeah, we'll do it. It all started 20 years ago in 2004. It all started with me going to church. It might have seemed normal to other people, but then I went on a bus and the journey began. Yeah, that singing was terrible. Please excuse me. Yeah, you know what? I'll just tell the story. We don't need singing on this ride. So, the reason why I chose the Dash Hound bus, I've had this for a couple of years now in the game. The main reason was because of the fact that I knew I would use it for a reenactment of sorts. You might have noticed that we started off in a church. That church doesn't look anything like the church I went to, which I will not say the name of for obvious reasons. I don't want to say any sensitive information. But I can tell you this. One morning was different from all the other mornings on the weekend during the summer for me. It all started off in 2004. I was 7 years old at the time. A young kid by the name of Brandon. And it was this very day that my life would change forever. It started off as any normal day, woken up by my papa, he wanted me to eat breakfast. But it was different. It's because weeks prior I was informed that I would be going to a place in Oklahoma, of all places, known as Gulch, USA. A place that nowadays goes under a different name, but is still in the same location. But back then, well, let's just say back then it was a different story. This place, Dry Gulch, was a summer camp and also a year-round retreat center, but for obvious reasons I was going for the summer camp route. So, weeks later, I was awoken by my papa. Just what you would normally expect, although this was actually my first time going to summer camp, so it wouldn't be like I was prepared for it. So I woke up, got dressed, ate breakfast, had my bag ready, which, yeah, we had to bring a suitcase. We were going to be gone for about 5 days. Then after that, we got into his truck. At least I'm pretty sure it was a pickup truck. I don't know what vehicle he was driving at the time. You you had to remember, this was 20 years ago this month. I don't remember the exact date of when I first went, but I can tell you it was June. It was June specifically because that's when first time campers would get to go to this summer camp, with the later visits of mine being in July and at one point bleeding into August. But we're focusing on the first ever visit to this place 20 years ago in June. So, anyway, I got my bag put into the car, and we drove to the camp, no, not camp, the church, and it was there that I noticed something was different. Normally, it's just a whole bunch of cars at the church. Normally there'd be praise and worship going on, but not this time. This was the day that we went to summer. So, to my surprise, I saw buses that looked kind of like this, albeit they had a very much different interior. As you can see, there's a lack of screens, and there's no. I hate having to use this in a graphical sense, but there was no bathroom behind it. There was no bathroom back there. This is just a normal transit bus, but the bus we were using was a charter bus. In fact, we were using two charter buses. One for boys, one for girls. So, anyway, Pep parked. We both got out. There was already a huge crowd of people outside the front of the church, and that's where the buses already were. So we all gathered around, talking to each other, a little bit of fellowship. And it's important to note that we were supposed to have been leaving at 9:30, and we did. I'll get to that. But after everyone was checked over and made sure that, hey, everyone was here that was going, we did a prayer, as any church would do before sending their campers to a place that's 300 miles away. And, yeah, after we prayed, we put our bags in the bus's underneath compartment, which you can see this bus has that. Like, those little doors underneath the seats, those were what I missed. Like, we would store the bags in those compartments. And after that, we prayed. No, not prayed. Actually, no, I got that mixed up. We put the bags in there first, and then we prayed. And then we all got onto the bus. We did a head count of who was all there. And it's important to note that, like I said before a few minutes ago, these buses had TVs in them. And I'm not talking about the flat screens, because those weren't really widespread. I'm talking about CRT TVs. The cathode-ray TVs that they were kind of boxy, but they weren't big TVs. They were fairly small, but they were just big enough to where you could still see enough going on the screen that you'd be able to tell what was going on. So, eventually, we gave the bus drivers the go-ahead to start driving, and thus began the 300-mile trip to a summer camp that 20 years later, I still fondly remember. Even if I did get in trouble a couple of times there because I was a stupid little kid, and even whenever I went for the last time when I was 12, which was almost 15 years ago as of next month. Actually, it will be 15 years ago as of next month. Let's just say that, even despite the little hiccups here and there, I had a grand time at the summer camp. So, anyway, we drove from the church, we exited from the driveway thing, got onto the road. Eventually, we got to the highway that we would have to turn onto to drive along. And, for a long time in the drive, it was just peaceful, There was no traffic jams. There were no accidents to speak of. It was smooth sailing. Certainly didn't see people like that driving around. Anyway, so, eventually at the, I guess you could say halfway point, maybe, we reached into Oklahoma. And the reason why I bring this up so soon is that we weren't at the summer camp just yet. We were still quite a ways away, but the route that we took us through Gainesville, Texas. And that's important because from there we would be entering Durant not long after we entered Oklahoma. The reason why I bring up Durant specifically is because on the way to the summer camp, we would be going to a McDonald's there for lunch. The thing about me was that even as a 7-year-old, I had this conscious idea of getting two different McFlurries on the trip alongside the meal. You know, whatever meal items I get, that would be dependent on what I thought, hey, that sounded good. But as for the McFlurries, that's where things get a little bit more symbolic. Because, like I said, even my first trip when I was only 7 years old, of course now I'm 27, so 20 years ago, yeah, I still fondly remember this. I made the decision of getting a M&M McFlurry for the trip to Dry Gulch, and the reason being was because of the fact that it symbolized my excitement. You know, it was full of color, full of excitement. It makes sense. And so after we ate lunch there, we got back on the buses and made our merry way there. And eventually we reached pretty much the final area that we would have to go to, which was a place called Adair, Oklahoma. From there, we turned north onto a specific road that had a S-shaped curve. On the upper part of this S-shaped curve, going towards Pryor, um, yes, that same Pryor that had a GameStop that sold retro games at some point in time, which that was long before I found out about that place. Um, it was there on that same road that would be the in-between point that we came across a sign. We slowed down as we reached that sign, and the sign read, Dry Gulch, USA, turn right. 8.5 miles. The reason why I said that in such detail there is because of the fact that that was our surefire sign that our trip was about to come to a conclusion. That we were about to make it to this grand place, and at the time I didn't know much about this place. I just knew that it was in Oklahoma. I knew that it was a church camp. I knew that we were going to be hearing some pretty awesome music for praise and worship. And I had a vague idea of what to expect from what people told me, that it was a summer camp. I was thinking, you know, well, what's a summer camp? What's it going to be like? And boy, when I tell you that this summer camp was the coolest thing I had ever experienced, I wouldn't be here making this stream if that weren't true. Which, by the way, I'm very sorry for the 2-month hiatus. It's just I was struggling of what I wanted to do next. Rest assured, I will be doing streams more often this summer, but it's just I was having trouble thinking about what I wanted to do. But when this month came along, I thought, well, wait a minute, this month is special. And, well, that is indeed the case. Because, you know, I remember this first trip vividly because that year I was watching Agent Cody Banks on the final few moments before we went to the camp. We were already watching the movie, and the part of the movie that we were on by the time we were almost at the camp was actually the part where Cody was, I think it was skiing or snowboarding down a mountain in order to reach a hideout for some villains. And we didn't quite finish the movie for very obvious reasons. Because we had just reached the registration gate where they had a booth where we had to check in. And of course we both got checked in, both being the buses. And it was there that after we were let in, we parked our buses. The bus drivers parked the buses. We didn't own the buses, they were used by a charter bus company, but we chartered them to drive us there. So that's basically what I mean. They weren't our buses in terms of ownership. We hired them to bring us there. But anyway, getting sidetracked here. We parked, we got off the bus, and our bags were gotten out by the staff of the camp. And thus began our little tour of the camp. We were shown all the places, the sights and sounds, the things that we would expect. Well, kind of. Because that was only the first day, the day that we got. So, of course, it wasn't, having a full-on tour. Instead, what it was that we just simply looking over to see what's going on. Oh, that's what's going on. It's export, but we're not focused on that because I'm driving a bus. I'm not driving a muscle car. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here again. So we got out the bus, we got our bags out, and we gave them to the staff. And they had golf carts that had special tow hitches that would tow these special small trailers that the go-karts would be equipped to tow around. And then we went to a office building. No, not office building. It was a special building that was used to check everyone, make sure everyone was okay, especially for lice, because if you had lice, you were immediately sent home, which would not be fun for someone like me, seeing as how, again, just for reference, this was a roughly 300-mile journey. Trust me, I would rather not wait for someone to drive 300 miles just to pick me up or something. And thankfully, it never got to that point. I did get in a little bit of trouble, but it was nothing more than just being torched, which was essentially like being hounded. Anyway, yeah, so there's that. But here's the thing. After we got off the bus, after we did all that fancy gobbledygook, we were sent to our designated dorms, or as we called them as kids, cabins. Because, we didn't know what that word meant. Of course, nowadays as adults, we do know what dorm means, but we called them cabins, and I think even the counselors called them that. And we primarily called them cabins because they kind of look like cabins. They have these really, really beautifully designed buildings that, believe it or not, this entire camp used to be a film set for a show that was called The Adventures of Gospel Bill. After that show concluded, they ended up repurposing the film set into a summer camp and retreat center. That same retreat center that was also called Gulch, just like in the show. And as luck would have it, both were made by the same people. I don't remember the guy's name, but I think it was Willie George. And it was that guy that was responsible for the foundation of Dragos USA, the summer camp. Again, it's important to note that the camp is under different ownership. It is no longer called Gulch USA. It is under a new name, which I won't say the name of because that's not really relevant to the story. We're talking about something that happened in the past. Anyway, what I can say, however, is that, we were all sent to our designated cabins. Okay, that scared me for a second. I saw a police van and I'm like, oh crap. Anyway, so we went to our cabins. We got everything all situated. My bag was already there at the cabin I was assigned to. And so we hung out for a while, getting some of our stuff unpacked, to get ourselves situated. And then eventually, after a while of waiting, we ended up going to the dining hall, which some people call the mess hall because, that's kind of the go-to term for summer camp's dining hall, even though it wasn't even the least bit messy. In fact, it was really clean. And don't call me a glutton for saying this, because I do like food. I just don't eat, like, tremendous amounts. Like, I'm not a slob. But when I say that this summer camp's food was incredible, you'd best believe it. Like they had all kinds of really good food. They had burgers, they had hot dogs. I think they even had pizza. They had chicken tenders, stuff like that. They had all sorts of really good stuff. So yeah, trust me, this place's food was nothing like the school food that I experienced when I was in school. It was awesome. I loved it. But we're not focusing on the food. That's just one of the aspects that made me enjoy the camp so much, though. Another thing that I really enjoyed was the overall aesthetic that they were going for. It was a mixture of Wild West with the buildings, seeing as how is, like I said, this was a former film set that just so happened to have resembled an Old West town, which was, coincidentally enough, also called Dry Gulch. So they named the summer camp after the fictitious town of the show. Anyway, after that, we went back to our dorm, and it was then that after a while we all left the building again to get ready for praise and worship at the chapel. Um, oh, right. Going back to the overall aesthetic. They had a mixture of Wild West and retro, as I would like to call it. The reason why I say that is because they had an assortment of different posters ranging from hunter and cowboy themed to stuff like, for example, there was a building that I will talk about in a little while, which I always called the Corridor Arcade because it was just a long straightaway inside the building that had an assortment of arcade machines, and my first two visits there, video game systems that were all propped up alongside the wall on your left whenever you walk in, or on your right, depending on which end that you walk in from. Anyway, I'm using that building as an example because it had, like, items hanging from the ceiling, and there was, like, a cardboard cutout related to Star Wars, like the original Star Wars, or it might have been the Phantom Menace, I don't remember. Actually, yeah, I think it was the Phantom Menace. But that's basically what I was getting at, is they had a mixture of those kinds of things. They also had some road signs and stuff like that, all strewn up on the walls and sometimes the ceilings, if there were a certain kind of ceiling. And that was the same kind of aesthetic that I noticed all throughout the camp, from the dorms to the buildings that had, like, activities in them, to even the dining hall. And that was part of the reason why I found this so endearing, is that it had this beautiful blend of cowboy-esque culture and retro culture that at the time was still relatively recent without being too terribly recent. There was that. And, again, after eating dinner, we went back to our dorm to get all situated. We got all dressed up and stuff. And we went to the chapel, had praise and worship. I still remember some of the theme songs. The only one I don't remember is '05, but that's because of the fact that nothing much really happened that year anyway that would be too memorable for me beyond just going to summer camp. So that's all I remember. But, yeah. Anyway, so yeah. So after we got done with praise and worship and stuff, we ended up doing what they called night activities. And that was where we got to do stuff like, we I don't remember what all we did my first year going. I think what we did was we went behind the chapel because they had a place called the Block Party. Um, but the other thing I remember was what happened the day after, because that was the first day of activities that I got to experience. And the first thing that we did that day after we got out of chapel was go-karts. That's right, go-karts. That was one of the many things that I was not expecting out of the summer. Because at that time, I didn't even know what a summer camp was, let alone, like, what to expect. So, also, I'm gonna have to break the tension here and be a cowboy for once. Also, you might notice the outfit that I was wearing at the beginning of the thing. Wait, yes, double action revolver. Yeah, I think that'd be cool. Anyway, yeah, so
I'll kill ya! Die, asshole! You got shot! I don't want to die!
oh,
You bleeding asshole!
well, I guess I'm gonna have to use the other big boy, the heavy big boy.
Looked like somebody had a little too much incest last night. Shit! We got Oh shit, dick!
Anyway, let me just go ahead and do this, and I guess I'll still be talking after I do this. 7:30, 7:38. Anyway, so go-karts weren't like your tried and true, drive around in a wide open area. Okay, 73. Anyway, it wasn't the usual, oh, just drive around in an open field. No, this was an actual, like, go-kart track that they had. And at first, when I first went for the first 2 years that I went, so 2004, 2005 respectively, it was just one singular go-kart track. And the go-karts there were just the usual go-karts that you would expect from a track like that. They had bumper rail things that were, you know, arranged to protect the go-kart from all angles.
Go to hell! We got a bleeder! I'll kill you!
So, anyway, going back to what I was saying. In later years, they added a second track, and then later on down the line, they had new go-karts to replace the old ones. I think they were just starting to not work that well. But I'm talking about my first ever go-kart. So we did racing. It wasn't competitive though. It was just normal, go-kart track riding. We we only poked fun at the idea of competition. We weren't actually going to get anything for winning a race. It was just for fun. After that, we went to the summer, no, not summer, swimming pool. The swimming pool was incredible. It had four different water slides. Two of them were actually mirrors of each other with a single loop. I don't mean a vertical loop, I mean a horizontal loop. So it's just like you would make a right loop or a left loop, respectively. Then we had the taller tower, which had the Hurricane, which was the one that I wasn't afraid of riding, and the Bullet, which was the one I was afraid of riding for the first year. And let me tell you, the Bullet got its name because, well, we went fast like a bullet. The Hurricane, though, was basically a combination of the two smaller slides, where first you went on a left loop, then you would go on a small straightaway, then a right loop, and then you would splash into the pool. The Bullet, however, from what I saw just in my first year, yeah, made a big splash. It was fun. There were a whole lot of other activities as well, like lake activities, because they had a reservoir there called Lake Hudson. I loved it. Actually, the first time we ever went there to that, um, we actually ended up riding a Oshkosh truck. You know, those old military trucks. And that was our way to get there quicker. Anyway, so, the lake activity is for as follows. An airhead inflatable, which I don't mean the airhead candy. I'm talking about airhead like those two-person inflatables that you would hold on to as a jet ski towed you. There would be a banana boat, which was top-heavy, so the center of gravity was at the top, the rider's boat. And so any sharp turns from the boat that was towing it would flip it over. I never wrote that for obvious reasons. Even though they would pick you up afterward if you fell off, or when you did. One second. Sorry about that. I had to close the door. Yeah. They also had bumper cars, which was pretty fun. They weren't like the car style bumper cars. They were like the twin joystick ones where you had like the two joysticks that would go left, no, not left and right, but forward and backward. So you would maneuver it that way. So if you push one joystick forward and the other one backward, you would spin around, which I did quite a bit. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. There was horseback riding too, and it was a lot of fun. Even though, like, it's important to note that up until that point, I'd never met a horse before. But now that I have, it was a lot of fun. You know, horseback riding. Oh, right. But my favorite thing, which this also has to do with something else that would happen all throughout our session at camp, was the night train. And the thing was, uh, the first few trips I went, so '04, '05, and I think even '06, because I think our dorm changed it up. I think it might have been the whole camp that changed this up. Was that on the third night that we were there? So, for reference, when we first went to the summer camp, we would leave on a Sunday, and I think in 2008 and 2009, we ended up going on a Thursday to go to the camp. So, for those first few visits as a reference, the first four visits of mine were from a Sunday to a Thursday. So we would end up riding the train on the third night. So that would be a Tuesday. And the train wasn't your normal, transit train like you would see, you know, around certain cities and stuff like that. In fact, there's even a train that I occasionally have seen on my travels to a city that's right next to us in order to go to a game store that way. But it wasn't that kind of bus. No, not bus, train. This was, believe it or not, an actual steam locomotive. I forgot the exact name of it, but I believe they called it the Silver Dollar Express, maybe. I don't remember. But that was the train that we rode. It had a specific route that it took. Of course, since it was an actual train, it was on rails. I'm not talking about the video game type boats. I'm talking about, like, actually on a rail. And it was fun. It had speakers built into the various cars that it had, so you'd be able to hear music. And during the ride, at various intervals, we would have camp staff, which we called counselors, and church staff, which went along with us as sponsors, escorting us with water guns. And let me tell you, it was awesome. Like, yeah, I didn't mind getting drenched. Besides, it was worth it given how warm it was out there. But, you know, it was a very fun experience. But like all good things, it must come to an end. Because on that Thursday of that week, we ended up going back home. We woke up at the same time as we would, you know, when we left for home. We would leave at 9:30, and our trip home was pretty much the reverse of what we did getting to the camp. And it was this exact same way across all the visits that. And so you remember how I said on the trip to Dry Gulch I would get an M&M McFlurry that would represent how excited I was? On my return trip home, I would get an Oreo McFlurry. Now, don't mistake this as me saying I didn't like the Oreo McFlurry, because I love both of the McFlurries. But the reason why I always got the M&M McFlurry on the day going to camp and the Oreo McFlurry on the way going home was because the Oreo McFlurry, because of the devoidness of its color, because, it was dark brown approaching black, and, the vanilla, it represented how sad I was to leave the camp, because I enjoyed it that much. And even in my older years, even going into middle school where I stopped going there, and even nowadays as a 27-year-old, I still fondly remember those days and I miss that camp every single waking moment. But that's where our journey ends. That was my first ever trip. I'm sure there's plenty of other things I was missing. Also, there's other buses here, ironically enough. Um, but what I will say is this: 20 years ago was one of the greatest days of my life. Also, I'm going to put the gun away. And across my 6 different visits to the camp, so 2004, 2005, 2006, 7, 8, 9, I've made some very lasting memories. I've made good friends there. I've experienced things that I enjoyed. There's no shortage of things I could talk about with that camp. And while it goes under a different name now, and some of the things are different from what I've heard, one thing is for certain. These are memories that will last with me my entire life. But here we are now, at the same church that I started off at in the game. Please bear in mind that the church I went to did not look anything like this. It was actually quite fancy looking. And we're talking about someone from Texas here. So to anyone who says, "Oh, you're all cowboys," no, we're not. Anyway, but with that being said, that ends our journey through my memories of summer camp. Oh, right, another thing. One thing I forgot was they actually had a store at the camp. So one of the things that we had to have on our list of things to bring were there were 2 different envelopes that we used for lunch, and that was for the trips. You know, the trip there and the trip back. Then there was a third envelope that was spending money for the general store, and that was where we could buy any kind of memorabilia like music from the camp for that respective year. We got shirts, we got toys, drinks, snacks, stuff like that. I forgot to include that mainly because of the fact that that was also the middle of the week. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. And to answer your possible question of why exactly are you wearing that, the white shirt actually represents the color of the shirt that was given to us from the camp. And it would have the associated theme. Like, for example, my first visit there was Ask Me, I Know, which was a song by popular Yancey, who actually still does stuff nowadays. Um, the swimming trunks are a reference to the swimming pool that I went to, although we also just wore that all day long. And the shoes were, because of the fact that it looks pretty similar to a kind of shoe that a kid would wear, you know, although it doesn't have the Velcro belt thing. And the shorter hair is a reference to, well, my shorter hair whenever I was growing up as a kid. Like, it was just, hair. So, yeah. Um, anyway, that's going to end our stream and our little trip down memory lane. So, with that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I apologize for the length of this, but I just wanted to take a trip down memory lane. Anyway, with that being said, thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you all very soon. See you later.